to the second episode of Gamecock Gateway here on Gamecock Central Radio. The second one of the last 2 months?
2 months-ish.
We're going to try and crank these out a little bit now the football season's over. Crank these out a little bit more frequently than what we have been doing. But Collyn Taylor here, Gamecock Central staff writer with Justin Hall, who's worked with Gamecock Central in the past and is still doing some stuff with us now. Coming to you live from my apartment, sitting at our kitchen table. But a lot of Gamecock stuff to talk about. But, Justin, I want to get your thoughts first on the men's team. Obviously coming off a big win this week at Georgia, and they got a big week ahead of them. We're recording on Tuesday, roughly 5 hours before the Kentucky game. So we're not going to give predictions on that because this will come out after the Kentucky game. But I just want to get your thoughts on the men's team as a whole and a big stretch of games against ranked opponents over the next few days.
Big stretch of basketball coming up for them. That was a big win on the road down in Stegman to get that win over Georgia, which is always a rock fight. It's always really, really hard to watch.
And it's hard. Frank plays a system where games can turn into. He's called them rock fights.
Yeah.
Both teams are very defensive minded.
Sure.
If we want to say it like that.
You want to call it defensive minded?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Okay.
South Carolina, I think he'll be the first to say they didn't have a good shooting day.
No.
But
if they had a good shooting season.
Yeah. But it's been, like you said, it was a rock fight.
Yeah. I remember the first game, one of the first times Carolina played Georgia under Frank Martin. It was a CBS game. It started at 2 p.m. And I always believed in Frank Martin when he first got hired. I thought he was the guy for the job, and I think that came to fruition last year. But I was one of the 5 people who watched South Carolina, Georgia that day, and I think the score at halftime may have been 12-5.
Oh,
it was so bad. And the good thing is for these two teams, we can move away from Georgia in a second, but you think about how much these two teams have played each other over the last 3 or 4 years and how impactful it's been in the conference race and the tournament race. Georgia single-handedly kept Carolina out of the tournament a couple years ago with the Lithuanians and Carrera. So it's good to beat. If you're a Carolina fan, you want to beat Georgia in everything. You want to beat Georgia in tiddlywinks if you have to. You just want to beat Georgia. It's kind of your thing. And so getting that win to break the schneid is very important because South Carolina's backed themselves into a corner with opening losses in 2 games and then beating Vanderbilt and then beating Georgia. Gives you some juice for Kentucky tonight. We're not going to give predictions, but I don't know how it's going to go. I just think it's very important. You need to, in basketball, I think it's important to split the week if you have to. Work a split. And this week's very hard to do that because you have 2 of the best teams in the SEC in Kentucky and Tennessee.
And it's going into the year, you looked at, I said it earlier on our prediction podcast, you think, this week's the easy week. You got Kentucky, which Kentucky's Kentucky, but then you have Tennessee on the back end. You're like, all right, Tennessee's a nice deep breath, but now they have Admiral Schofield and these guys that are just,
Rick Barnes has built his program.
People. Yep. And Tennessee's a tough matchup for South Carolina because they're lucky they're at home. Tennessee is what South Carolina was last year, with now Rick Barnes kind of getting his guys in there, and they're more experienced. They're kind of a veteran team. They have a lot of veteran leadership, I should say, and South Carolina is young, so it'll be an interesting week. And then you have Florida after that.
I'm looking at this. I'm looking at the schedule. Yeah. You have Tennessee at home. Then you travel to Gainesville, and then 3 days later you play the number 8 right now, the number 8 team in the country in Texas Tech. Yeah. You get them in the challenge. Then you get a Mississippi State team that's coached by Ben Howland, who's never going to be an easy out. A&M, who's still a really good team. They're just banged up. Arkansas on the road. That's 2 road games. Yeah. Try go to play them in Bud Walton, and then you play Florida and Tennessee, and then Auburn again.
Yeah, and Auburn's leading the league.
Leading the league, and then you play Georgia again to wrap up the season. Yeah.
A lot of people talk about the SEC not being great in basketball.
I'm sorry, but
you have guys that are going to be, draft picks this year. You got ranked teams. The SEC could potentially have, I would say, 3 to 5 Sweet 16 talent teams this year with, Florida can get there if they get healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Texas A&M's a Final Four team if they can get healthy. You know, and then
Tennessee's
you obviously have
16.
Missouri who's playing well as of late, Tennessee who's playing well, Kentucky's playing well. And then in the middle of that, you get a Texas Tech team that at the beginning of the year thought was a pretty equal matchup and is now, knocking off teams in the Big 12.
Yeah, just, taking care of Kansas.
So yeah, no, it's South Carolina's freshmen next year that are going to be sophomores. Freshmen this year, they're going to be sophomores next year, are going to be well versed in playing talent.
And that's the thing that Carolina fans need to remember. So if you're listening to this, I'm gonna talk to you for just a second, and we're gonna talk about with the women's team too. But I've come to this realization over the past week and a half to 2 weeks, or the whole basketball season, since I watched this team play a home game. I covered it back in the early part of the season. You reached the mountaintop last year, a magical Final Four run. You lose 3 seniors, your best player, SEC Player of the Year, top scorer, period. And PJ left as well, thinking he could get on a pro roster, and that hasn't worked out for him. And that's not of our concern.
He's actually playing pretty well.
He's playing pretty well,
but that's the G League.
Yeah, sponsored by Gatorade now. So listen, he's going to one day become a good pro. I believe that. I believe he has the talent. But you lose 4 big contributors. You replace those contributors with Frank Booker, who's never played in a Carolina uniform, Wes Myers, Justin Minaya. So you're replacing them really with Kotzer, Gravett, and Silva. Yeah,
and then Hassan Gravett's, he's a good player, but he's still trying to learn how to play point and
he's not a point guard. That's the thing.
And make correct decisions with the basketball, not turn the ball over, which is something I think that Corey Holden can come back. That's going to be a big boost for this team, just to give him some depth.
And maybe having Brian Bowen in practice will help.
Yeah,
that would do some good things.
Brian Bowen and Rob Felder.
Rob Felder back
in the fold and working through his things that Frank's going to make him.
So who knows what can happen over the next couple of weeks? What if this team? I'm not saying they will, because I don't believe this to be the case. But what if this team comes out and starts throwing punches and starts winning a couple of these games? Yeah. Gets a win over Tennessee, gets a split with Florida, wins another one against Georgia, shocks Auburn. Something happens where this team could be an 8 or 9 seed again and get back to the tournament. I think this is an NIT team.
Yeah, they have to really, really go on a run here late. Yeah. And give Frank Martin credit. He's doing a pretty good coaching job with this team, and he's. I'll give Frank Martin some credit. He's still, even he admits that he's trying to figure this team out still. Just because every time they get close to figuring things out, Corey Holman goes down with an injury, or Hassani, Hassani goes down with an injury, or things like that. Yeah. So they're just now getting to the point where they can figure out what they can be, and I think that's going to be. This is a measuring stick stretch for South Carolina over the next 2 weeks.
Where are you?
And you kind of see where you are in terms of development, and then kind of figure things out after that. So it'll be interesting to see how they play, and if things can kind of build on that Georgia win.
Yeah, and then you look at the other side. You got women's basketball, the women's basketball team for the last couple of years has been the toast of the university. I don't think there's any question about that, with baseball falling on a quote-unquote hard times.
Right.
Take that for what it's worth. Football going through transition. Men's team up until last year being on the up. The women's team has been the toast of the university, and now you come off of a national championship over an SEC team. You come into this year, a lot of hype, and this last game against Tennessee. Listen, people forget about Tennessee because Pat Summitt's not the head coach, but Holly Warlick, the job she's done there, they've been to the Elite Eight 3 of the last 5 years. Yeah, they're still Tennessee.
Yeah, and they turn out talent, and South Carolina obviously didn't have Asia Wilson for that game.
Right.
But it's a team that's not deep right now.
Yeah. And they're trying to find themselves.
Injuries are kind of taking their toll. Mm-hmm. And you look at, Bianca Cuevas-Moore's been out with that knee injury. Lindsey Spann was out for an extended period of time. Asia Wilson, we don't know how long she's going to be out. She's out of they said that she was going to get out of the cast on Monday, so she's out, and they're kind of evaluating based off that. So they're still trying to figure it out, and they ran out of gas against Tennessee.
They did. They fought back to within 4.
Within 4, and then Tennessee went on that run because they just couldn't. They just didn't have any more left in the tank. I think it'll be good for this team because it's pretty much like telling all the young kids, all right, go out there and see what you can do.
See what you can do against Tennessee.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah. So I think it'll be it's good for them come tournament time.
Yeah.
They're going to make the tournament.
Yeah, they're going to make the tournament. South Carolina, a bad women's season for South Carolina is going to be a top 25 finish and a 4 seed at the worst.
4 seed,
the worst.
You're probably going to make the Sweet 16 just because
you're talented.
Because you're talented, and talent usually wins in more so in women's basketball than men's.
Right.
And you look at the women's is nice too because if you're a top 16, one of the top 16 seeds, you get home games.
Right, you get 2.
Yeah, you get 2 home games. So that's going to be big for South Carolina because 13,000 people come to women's games, and which is unprecedented in terms of
UConn.
UConn, Tennessee, and those teams can get 13.
Stanford.
South Carolina is now doing it too.
Yeah.
So I think this is a tough stretch because you have so few players. If Asia Wilson can't go for this week against Vanderbilt, they could be playing with 8 to 9 players,
which is not good for that. Yeah.
And Tennessee exploited that well. I think they ran in transition a lot, and they had a lot of quick offensive sets to kind of tire them out. But it'll be interesting to see because, I think that they lost a lot last year with, Alicia Gray and Kayla Davis both deciding to go pro.
Which was a good decision for both of them.
Go make your money.
And Alicia Gray's doing pretty well for herself, by the way. Yeah. So is Kayla.
Yeah.
But
I will never not tell someone to go make money. If they can go make money, make money.
If you're like a first round draft pick, go make money.
Yeah, they're both.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just think it's a tough stretch for Carolina just because of injuries. And you look at their upcoming schedule. They got Vanderbilt on the road, Kentucky on the road. So they got 2 road games this week, and then Arkansas at home. Arkansas is a pretty decent team, and then you get
the rematch.
Oh, you get the rematch. The rematch of the rock fight, my friends, Missouri. And that's what's interesting is because that game falls right before UConn.
Yeah. And
so how much energy is going to be spent from your coaching staff, from your fans, because the UConn game's a home game.
Yeah.
So how much energy does your staff, your coaching staff, your support staff, your players, your fans, the university, all the juice that's going to go into that Missouri game because you want to pay them back, and then you get UConn like 3 days later.
Yeah. So I think that if you're South Carolina, who's now competing pretty heavily to win the SEC, it's not a gimme anymore because you have Tennessee, Mississippi State, and Missouri all kind of competing for that top spot too. I think they'd rather have Missouri. I mean, if it was me, I'd rather have Missouri. But beating UConn is obviously
UConn's a big deal.
That's a message. That's a recruiting message more than anything else.
I watched them play Texas last night, and they're a beatable team. But I just think they're too deep for the South Carolina team.
Yeah, especially with all the injuries.
Without Asia.
If injuries continue to play a part come February 1st.
And Mississippi State's still undefeated, by the way.
Yeah, they're good.
They're so good.
They're really good. They were ahead of schedule last year. Making the Final Four.
And then playing for the national championship.
Yeah, playing for a national title and beating UConn.
Insane.
But I think that, they were a year ahead of schedule. South Carolina went on the schedule they were supposed to be on and won the title when they were, I guess, supposed to win the title with all those transfers coming in. And Asia's in her 3rd year. So I think that was...
And they didn't have Elena, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, they did not have Elena for that tournament run, which is still mind-boggling to me.
National. I mean, they won the SEC tournament.
Yeah, without Elena. And that was the question hanging over their heads. I just think... And so I don't want... What I would caution fans is don't jump to conclusions off of 1 year for either one of these programs. I think that's the main thing, is that both of these programs are on solid footing. They've got what they need. You've got the people in place who know what they're doing. I mean, Dawn walked into a program that did not win since 1980-something. Yeah. With all due respect to Susan Wolvius, they didn't win. Yeah. And that you were literally saying, fans, come pay $1 and you can come watch our team. Yeah. And Frank walked into an even worse situation.
Yeah, a very talent-depleted team.
Extremely talent-depleted. You could have brought the popcorn guy down. He could have been your point. Yeah. So... I think fans need to understand where these two teams are at. And if you want to take this mindset, baseball season's a month away. Yeah. I don't know how you want to take that. But I think these basketball teams you have chances down the stretch over the next month or two where it's the only thing on. Support the programs. They have chances for big wins. Yeah. And I think and the women's team, most importantly, is going to get those wins because Asia's going to get healthy. And Kiki Harrigan, you will hope she's healthy as well. Yeah, and Dawn luckily said that they think it's better than what they initially thought, which is a huge plus. But yeah, there's potential with these teams. Obviously with the women having a Wooden Player of the Year candidate on their team, right. And South Carolina
there's potential there. They've shown flashes of being able to compete with top tier teams. And by no means am I comparing South Carolina men's basketball right now to North Carolina men's basketball right now, but even teams like North Carolina and Kentucky and some of the teams that are considered the blue bloods of college basketball miss the tournament some years.
It's rare, but it happens.
It happens, and you know, you lose guys that were probably. I'd probably put Sindarius Thornwell as the best player to ever come through South Carolina men's basketball.
That's interesting. Let's have that debate. We'll have that. You can tweet with me at Justin B. Hall. That's interesting. That's a good. Yeah, because I'm going to get the hardliner who's like, no offense, guys, but I'm going to get the hardliner who's over 60 years old who's going to say, no, John Roach is the best player to ever play at South Carolina. Bobby Crimmins, John Ribach, they're the best. Alex English gets an argument there. Yeah. And I think you can even spend our time. B.J. Mackey, Devin Downey, you know. But
to argue, I mean, my argument is who did more for the program, I guess. You know, with, you know, Sindarius was he was the face of March Madness. When that tournament run they were going, he was the face of that program.
You're right.
The Cinderella, the darling team that everyone kind of adopted.
His reaction when they were beating Marquette, when he was sitting under the basket. Yeah. That's the picture of that whole tournament.
Yeah. Which, by the way, they play the tournament on loop at the men's basketball facility.
Of course they do.
We walked in and we were watching, waiting for Frank Martin's Brian Brown press conference, and the Marquette game was on.
Of course it was. It was one of the greatest moments of my South Carolina fandom was watching that game against Marquette.
And I was actually driving back. No, I was at Tennessee. That was a baseball weekend. They were playing at Tennessee, and we had Scott Hood. May God rest his career soul, who's now in New Mexico right now. If you're listening, Scott, we miss you. But he was at the game, and I was in Tennessee, and we were watching up in the press box as things finished up.
Yeah.
Then that Sunday I was driving back from Knoxville when they beat Duke. I was listening on the radio, and I pulled into my apartment parking lot and immediately went to 5 points after to watch the reaction.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, and so
it's better than 5 points after Big Carolina win.
Yeah, and so, but you know, they play it routinely at the men's basketball facility. But I would argue that Sindarius Thornwell is the most important. I wouldn't say most talented, but most important player in program history.
You can find him on Twitter.
Yeah,
at Colin Taylor. You can at him on that. And you know it depends on what generation you grew up in.
And Alex English is obviously up there.
Alex English may be one of the greatest basketball players to ever touch a basketball.
Yeah,
I mean, you look at his pro career.
He's top 10 in scoring.
He's top 10, top 12. I mean, you're starting to get these young pups come in and start
hitting threes like it's no big deal.
Yeah. And I think, for what it's worth, I did not know this was going to take this turn, but I think for South Carolina fans, what John Roach and John Ribach and those guys meant to the 60s basketball, my granddad was a huge historian with it. He grew up with it. He watched it happen. And Frank McGuire. And I'm waiting for the moment when South Carolina names the floor at Colonial Life Arena Frank McGuire Court. I'm waiting. I'm waiting. And it'll happen eventually. There are trophies still in the Coliseum that haven't been moved over.
Right.
So that was a rich era of Gamecock basketball. So that holds a lot. I could see it. I like Sindarius. I think for him to commit 4 years to this program and literally bring the success to a head in his senior season, I think that tournament run makes it even more special.
Yeah.
He had the talent around him. And I think Devin Downey didn't have as much.
I mean, Devin Downey also won a game on his own against Kentucky.
Devin Downey beat Kentucky by himself.
Yeah.
By him twice.
Yeah.
Twice. By himself.
That photo is still hanging in the media room at Colonial.
Of course it is.
Him on the, yeah.
Yeah. He beat Kentucky by himself twice. One in Columbia and one in Rupp. I do believe I'm correct on that. So that's a...
Yeah.
Chew on that a little bit, people. Think about that a little bit. Don't yell at me, though.
Alex English also is the 18th leading scorer in NBA history.
Wow. Behind names such as Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
He actually has more points than he does Twitter followers.
Stat of the day.
So you're welcome. Kareem, Karl Malone, Kobe, Michael Jordan, Wilt Chamberlain, LeBron.
Excuse me, you skipped Dirk at 6. Yeah. Thank you.
Dirk. John Havlicek, Dominique Wilkins. I mean, some of the
Tim
greats.
Duncan, Paul Pierce.
Yeah.
Kevin Garnett, South Carolina product.
So
he's right in front of Reggie Miller, by the way, who hit a lot of threes.
So yeah, it's
and he's in front of the logo.
Mm-hmm. That's true, Jerry West, and He scored 25,613 career points.
Not bad.
Yeah, that's pretty okay.
That's decent.
He's just a shade under 4,000 Twitter followers.
So he literally has 5 times the number of points as he does Twitter followers. Get on Alex English about that. You can find him at AlexEnglish_2 on Twitter. He's very involved in the basketball program again. He was not there for a while.
Yeah,
and we can talk about that off the recording as to why that was. But, I mean, you're getting that influence back with him. So that's good. Yeah, he may be the best basketball player of all time, Carolina, in my opinion. I'd take him over. Him and Sendarius one-on-one. I'll take Alex English.
But Alex never went to a Final Four. So I'm gonna.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, okay, whatever. That's fine. That's fine. Okay,
but
it's true. That's fair. Okay.
Yeah, I think we've done enough talking. Do you want to get to our interviews?
Let Langston. Take over.
Our interview today, we talked with Langston Moore in the early afternoon over the phone on Tuesday, right before we recorded this. He was great. We talked from Lou Holtz to his playing career to going 0-16 with the Lions over his career, and I think he said he's the only player in NFL history before the Browns obviously did it this year that went winless first season in college and then went winless again in the pros.
The first season in college may be the key to that stat. There are very few who've done that.
And so he was great. We talked about his book that he helped write with Preston Thorne, a former Gamecock as well. And then we talked about his Eat to Win camp and just kind of a wide range of subjects. So here he is. We'll stop talking and let you enjoy Langston Moore. Now welcoming on Langston Moore, former Gamecock defensive lineman, current activist and kind of all around with Gamecock athletics and sideline reporter for 107.5. Langston, thanks for joining us today.
Man, thanks for having me, man. It's always awesome to get on here and talk. Anything Gamecocks, right?
Right, absolutely. Football season just ended, but it's now talking season, so I guess that's what we're doing now. So you starting kind of diving right into it. You wrote a book recently, Just a Chicken. I wanted to talk a little bit about that and kind of the writing process. How hard is it to write a book and let alone a children's book?
Well, going through the process with my partner, Preston Thorne, who also played at South Carolina, was a co-captain for, I think, in the 2000s, right after me. Going through that process of writing the book was always, I guess being young and dumb and not really know who we were getting ourselves into was probably something that really helped us out because, not knowing what, the whole process was, I guess, what a traditional children's book is. So many pages, all these different things, these certain type of fonts. It follows a certain type of art. We just kind of went in there and kind of created and used some different things that, our own personal story, but also the story that we used to hear from, our playing days at South Carolina from Coach Holtz. So, just trying to craft that into our own type of deal, our own type of, story of, being a lot when I was at South Carolina, folks used to say we didn't belong in the SEC, so that kind of plays on the name and the moniker of Just a Chicken or Just a whatever. Of course, those folks up the road wouldn't even give us the dignity of calling us Gamecock sometimes. They'd only call us Just Chickens and things like that. So, all of that, turning that into the story, this was actually something Preston and I have been mulling over and working on, but we were, starting off, we were trying to be like super ambitious, like our Coach Holton wanted to write all these deep, inspirational books, and after years of like just doing that and not really coming up with anything really good, we were like, man, let's just do a kid's book. It'll be easy. We can do it in like, we'll have it before the Clemson game. We'll have it before the Clemson game. It'll take like, 2 weeks, and 2 or 3 years later, here we have our book. But it's been a great process, and it's been fun to do it with, of course, my former teammate.
Yeah, and you've been doing these book stops at different schools around the state. Do you have any more recent numbers? I got some recent numbers here that you guys have gone about over 2,200 miles across the state. Is that true?
I gotta look at the latest numbers, but every month, the last fall, we went to over probably 35 schools this past fall, going about 3 or 4 a week across South Carolina. So we had crisscrossed the state, and it was we got a chance to see some of those intimate, not so thought of parts of South Carolina.
Right.
We felt some of the coaches, on the recruiting trail, getting back into some of these places. But it was great, man, because the biggest thing we can always connect with when we go to these places, whether rural or major metropolitan cities like Columbia or Charleston, was the idea of football, South Carolina football, guys being from South Carolina, and everything centered around football, but also marrying that up with literacy and reading has really been cool for us to go out there and kind of use as a way to get into these communities and to talk about literacy books. And that's something that most people, when you talk about it, it's not really a cool subject. But again, just kind of blending the things and always talking about, of course, what made us avid readers beyond just being football players has been really cool to go out there and share that message with the kids in schools, and really, especially with a lot of young boys who don't really try to make that correlation between reading and success and reading and being cool. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and what's kind of been the feedback you've gotten, I mean, on the book recruiting trail, and have you found some prospects maybe in the 20, what would it be, 28 classes?
Oh, there's plenty of young athletes out there, and I'm telling you, it's the division is still just as strong as probably as ever when I was in school, between the kids that are on the orange and purple side and the kids that are on the unguarded and black side, and then there's a few in the back that are either like confused, they're either like Florida fans or something like that, they're just on the fringe, or Georgia fans like that. So, but it's been great to go out there, and the reception, especially from the kids, they again trying to covertly go in there and kind of being able to kind of share messages with them, but also to educate them and kind of hold a mirror up to some of the things that they can do beyond sport, beyond that. But the basis of all of that is going to be literacy and reading. So it's been great to really get that reception, not only from elementary kids, but middle school, high school, doing some of the things what we do with corporate businesses and different things like that. It's been phenomenal, but especially the teachers and the educators within the school. That's been really the most gratifying thing to really kind of help them out, being a son of a teacher, Preston being a teacher, being in the classroom himself for 10, 11 years. All of that has been super important for us to really kind of serve as the backbone and muscle for all the great things that they're doing day to day in schools.
Right. And transitioning now a little bit, when you're not, working with your book and doing all the other things during the actual football season, you're on the sidelines, helping out with game day coverage. How was that? And, what do you enjoy doing about kind of live radio and being on the sidelines during games?
Man, it's just it probably gets me about as close to the game as I want to be without having to actually play or be in shape or all of those things. I can.
You get to be on the off-season diet all the time, right?
Yeah, and all the time, and I still have not gotten off that last off-season since the last time I played back in 2010 or something like that. But yeah, it's great because I've always been around radio. My father was, a broadcast journalism major, went to South Carolina, graduated, was in radio for years. So I was around radio in a different context. He did basically like drive time and morning shows and different things up and down the East Coast. And so being around radio has always been, something I've always known. But sports, and obviously having a microphone in my face playing sports, has always not been something that's been foreign to me. So, it kind of seemed like something that always was going to be there for me. So being able to do it and do it, especially coming out the gate with South Carolina and being around my school and Tommy and Todd and seeing all these guys that I used to know and be around the program when I was there is really cool. But also just to be able to have, access to the program and still kind of be involved and be in it in that kind of sense, to really just kind of talk to the players at the practices, different things like that, because that's really the biggest thing that I really enjoy, is really to make that connection to the current guys and maybe just kind of tell them some of the bonehead things that I did and all the knucklehead things I did to kind of help them out so they didn't have to make some of those bad choices or whatever it is. Or maybe just sometimes just being open ear for some of these guys too. Javon Kinlaw, guys from Charleston, all those different things. It's really cool to connect with a lot of those guys, because I see myself and a lot of those guys that are on the sidelines right now in Carolina.
And so you're doing the sideline reporting. You deal with Todd and Tommy, which is always fun. They're always a hoot to listen to and hang out with and talk to. And so you've been doing radio since 2012, I believe. So let's go to these coaching contracts that just happened. Something that if I would have told you, let's say October, let's say that Vanderbilt game, the first game, home game after Steve leaves the football team. If I'd have told you 2 years later you have a 9-4 football team with a head coach with a contract extension and two young, unproven but very talented coordinators with contract extensions and a possible top 20, top 15 recruiting class, would you have called me crazy?
Probably the biggest question probably would have been, what's their names? Who are these people?
Right.
Where did these magical people come from all of a sudden? Because in the midst of losing games and doing all that, never really know what bottom is and how things are swinging up and kind of seeing where. And it's, just to put it in that context, what you guys just did, it's definitely, you always want the improvement, but to see it like that is definitely encouraging for South Carolina and for everybody else who loves that you're on the Garnet and Black, just because of, all of the promising things are for the future with so much immediate success with, giving us kind of a little bit of that appetite pleaser already. So it's been great to, again, just personally being around this and seeing kind of Coach Muschamp really have that relationship with the players, but dealing with the media, but also seeing the detail and the attention to detail, not only him, but everybody on that staff really exhibits. And it's, there's no big surprise to me that these guys are able to win so many games so fast. I didn't know if it would be in this fashion, getting to 9 games so quickly, but definitely will take that.
And then obviously the newest addition to the staff was made official on Friday afternoon. Marcus Lattimore rejoining the staff in a non-coaching role, but director of player development. You deal with, obviously with the book and with young kids, but then you lived the college athlete life, and you've been there, and you've done that, and you went to the NFL, and a lot of these guys won't. They talk about it being a pipe dream. So what is it like having a guy like Marcus back in the fold with the program, being able to mentor these guys off the field?
From a player standpoint, I think it's extremely exciting. Player, you get excited, say, man, you have a guy that you really have that star quality, has a lot of social capital. Marcus Lattimore, that story, the build up and everything, but also the flip side of that, also, him, from me kind of being an adult now, if I was detached from the program, seeing that flip side of Marcus having to overcome injury, something that's, any program could have gone through, but to have him do it on the stage, the front stage, and obviously the story behind that, it's hard to really have somebody who's been through something like that, but to be able to genuinely tell kids, what to look for, not just with injury, but transitioning out of the game. Because I think that's the biggest thing. Because again, football is such a big prominent thing in so many of our lives. Even if, just from being players, if you played as a little kid from first grade all the way through college, that's well over 10 years of your life, and you get into cycles of things about football. But when you don't have that sport to really rely on, and football teaches you so much, it's kind of hard to make that transition out just from high school to college to NFL. Guys in the NFL that only stay for 1 or 2 years or stay for 10 years. It's really hard to try to let guys know that transition is kind of tough. And, but there's still so many messages, and football is such a great teacher if you really are aware and conscious of some things that can be, learned from or extracted from the game. And I think Marcus is a guy who really epitomized, if you do things the right way, you work hard, and then you do all of these intangible things that we all have control of, but couple that with just some amazing character and talent, that you can go extremely far and affect a lot of people. And that's the biggest thing, is even if you don't have the talent or all those things, if you can just, be a man of character, self-awareness, all the things that Marcus was talking about in his press conference, I think that's going to be a valuable tool for South Carolina. I think that's going to be a valuable tool, not just for the athletic program, but for our brand and everything. And I think it's just, again, speaks volumes too. I think about Coach Muschamp and him knowing what we needed to have something unique like this in South Carolina, and I was glad that all of these things could be worked out, because nobody's going to work harder. Nobody's going to have more of an impact and really give us his best foot forward than Marcus Lattimore. And I really love that quote where he said that, I want to be around here for the first championship. And that, again, a guy who's showing these young men, probably showing a lot of us adults, that there's so many different ways you can affect the community, you can affect a program, you can affect a sports team, and without even having to put on the pads and the helmet and all those different things. So again, just continues to teach, and I think that's going to be one of the biggest things for Marcus and this program, having him be together, and hopefully for a long, long time.
Right, and I know you mentioned earlier and you enjoy being around the program, and you obviously were a big part of South Carolina football in the late 90s and early 2000s. What was it like playing then and playing under a guy like Coach Holtz?
it's always funny because we always say, man, like the older we get, the smarter and cooler Coach Holtz was. Now at 17, 18 years old, the reason I left school early to come to South Carolina, in summer one before everybody started coming in January, I thought I was ahead of the curve then, and now everybody comes in January. Seeing this older guy, and being like, man, this guy, has these white tennis shoes on. He looks like he's getting ready to go to lunch at the country club and play another, just a short 8-round of golf. He just looks like he's in retirement, but just the total opposite of that. A guy who was just, sitting in those meetings, man. We always talk about my teammates and old guys who are in and around the program, and just the wealth of knowledge, and just take football away from it. Just the speeches and Fortune 500 type level management that we would get from a guy like that, but you kind of take it for granted because you're really worried about just getting this last hour of study hall in and not really wanting to hear what this guy with a list has to say up at the podium. But all in all, you wish you could remember all of those things. But the cool thing about it, and again, the smarter, the older we get, the smarter our coaches get and our parents get. He told us, at one point there would be times when we wouldn't remember all the same stories, and the jewels and the beauty of it would be getting back together, relishing in that with your teammates after you've been an old guy and been away from football so long, and that's been the cool thing. We get back together at games and different things. Just guys bring up different stories and things you forget about, and that's been a really cool part about having this brotherhood, this coop that you kind of committed to long time ago when you were 17. You didn't realize how great it was this long.
And we talked to Eric Kimry the last time, and he has a pretty spot-on Lou Holtz impression. Do you have one? Is there a favorite story you remember? Because there's nothing better than Lou Holtz stories, in my opinion.
Man, there's so many great Lou Holtz stories, man. One of the ones I always like to talk about is one time we were playing Tennessee, and we obviously couldn't get over that Orange Crush kind of period with Florida, Clemson, Tennessee, and Coach Holtz was trying to be the master motivator. He was trying to figure out something, to get it over. And there was so much talk, I remember, in the media at that time, just about the Orange Crush, and was South Carolina just afraid of just the color orange in itself. And I remember one time Coach Holtz was, riled us up in this little pregame practice speech. This was a practice on maybe a Wednesday practice. I'm sure we had Bull in the Ring and Oklahoma drills and everything on that day anyway. And he goes up, gets us all fired up, and he walks outside. He has everybody stay in the meeting room. And he comes back in with this huge Tennessee helmet on. He's got it strapped up, and it's bobbling on his head. And he looks like a life-size bobblehead dog, really. And we're all just dying laughing. He's like, see, this is how I want you guys to remember the Tennessee players on Saturday when we take off. And it doesn't mean anything. These guys I was just like, oh, my God, this dude is amazing, man. So, there's so many stories, but, some of the best stories are the ones we probably should be recording. Those are the ones you kind of, you hear when we pull you to the side. And because, as you know, Lou was a quick-witted dude. He was always somebody who could always come up with something. But, just going through, we're telling the story when Lou would go through the annual, end-of-the-year grades and guys who would get certain grade point averages. And I remember one time Lou called out a guy who was like, wow, son, you got a 1.62 or whatever. He's like, at least, I don't even see how you get a 1.62. I can't even do the list. I can't even see how you got the 1.62 because it takes effort to get a 1.62 in a class, and he's just killing his kid the whole time. But it was great. At the time, you're devastated because, one, you never want to be that kid. You never want to be humiliated like that. But two, it held us all to be accountable. Right. And, as a family, as a brotherhood, as a football team, we needed everybody's average. We needed everybody. But, it was great life lessons. And it kind of reminded me, of course, growing up in a household with siblings, you always try to learn from the older brother to not do those crazy things that they do. You won't get yelled at by your parent. But Lou was phenomenal. He was a great guy.
Now, you were on the team with when Kimry threw the fade and,
yes.
the owner. What was that night like after you guys beat Mississippi State? And what was the celebration with the team and celebration that night after you guys won that game?
Man, I chalk those times up to just being hit in the head a lot. I don't remember a lot from those nights, but I can tell you a lot of money was probably spent. What do they say in any scandal? Just follow the cash. Yeah. At that time, we probably took our little bit of per diem and we actually probably paid cash, so that probably saved us instead of the cars. But we was probably ended up in 5 Points somewhere, spent some money on some pizza at some point around 1:00, and but it was a phenomenal night, man. It was great. I mean, just that whole game, just. Anytime you see like a comeback like the Minnesota Miracle that just happened this past weekend, you think about the times you were in games like that, and it would just go from just that roller coaster of, man, how are we going to do this? Man, Phil Petty is hurt. I mean, all of those things going, and then Kimry comes in and just does it. And typical, I mean, even when I would look at the film to this day, it just looks like Kimry when he would warm up. But that's just kind of the mindset of a guy that not going out there trying to do something and be Tom Brady or whatever. Before Tom Brady was Tom Brady, he was just relaxed in the skill set. He told the coaches on the sideline, man, let's just throw the fade, man. And that was the best shot we had, whether it was, Jerry Rice at the end or Sidney Rice. Kimry was the guy who put it in the right position. And obviously those are things that make love. And to do it on Jefferson Pilot Sports, that was always the big thing I remember. Jolie Dunn and Mississippi State, and just that crazy old, I mean, Fred Smoot. I mean, man, you don't realize how many Saturdays I used to always, because that would always usually be the Mississippi State game. So they were kind of in that hierarchy and still have swung themselves back in the last couple of years in the SEC. But they were tops up there, and to beat them in that fashion, man, that was huge. It was huge, and man, Kimry forever is just the man for that, man.
Yeah, and I've woken up from many afternoon naps to the Jefferson Pilot game in the middle of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter. So yeah, bring back a lot of memories then. And you actually got drafted out of South Carolina in the 6th round, I believe. But just take me through getting that phone call. What's the "you've been drafted" phone call like?
Oh man, well for me, I was a little peeved, man. I thought I was going to go a lot sooner. Of course, we're all egotistical football players and think we're the best at everything. But I had actually got a couple calls from Seattle and some folks earlier, like the 4th round. So I was really excited. And kind of the deal is the secret, or not the secret, but what they tell you is, once you start getting 1 or 2 calls, that's kind of when everybody starts gravitating to where you're really truly going to get drafted at. So I thought 1 was going to lead to the whole bunch of calls or somebody just drafting me outright, and it didn't happen till the 6th round. So it always reminds me that and that's the biggest thing that I learned with playing in the NFL, or just where recruiting rankings or where rankings period. I mean, it doesn't matter where you're drafted at; it matters where you're going to be at 3 to 4 to 5 years from now. Especially with the NFL, it's such a transient business, and there's so much turnover, especially now not having guaranteed contracts, and teams like the New England Patriots are just super shrewd with how to manage their 53-man roster. You have to kind of always be aware that this is not something that's going to last forever, and so being able to prepare and do all the things to put yourself in those situations is a lifelong lesson. But getting that phone call and then having to talk to I think I talked to actually the Browns owner, Mr. Brown, and Marvin Lewis quickly after that, because he had about Mr. Brown probably had about 10 words to say to me. Congratulations. If you ever heard him talk before, that's pretty much how he talks in real life. Congratulations, Cincinnati. And so that coupled with a little bit of my own disappointment, you could tell I was super excited. But it was cool, man. It was cool to be drafted. I understood that once I got that phone call, was really about, I was just excited to get to work the next day. But I was still in school at that time, because I was actually still training and taking classes to kind of finish up to get my degree that semester. And so I actually had to go back to class that Sunday night. I had to go back to Columbia and get ready for class the next day. But it was cool, man. It was all good.
So if I tell 3rd-year pro defensive lineman Langston Moore that you get the opportunity to go up against one of these 4 quarterbacks in the championship Sunday this week, we'll throw Tom Brady out, because do you want to go up against Tom Brady, or would you rather go up against Bortles or Keenum or Foles?
I've gone against Tom Brady, and every time I tell everybody, ask me about Tom Brady, say, tell me a Tom Brady story, I tell you, Tom Brady fell on his butt. It was 3rd and 10, and he fell on his butt, and he made the first down against the team I was playing one time. I was actually on the field, so I saw that, and I was like, nah. So let's take Tom Brady off the board. Let's take Tom Brady.
Keenum, yeah. So Keenum, what is a defensive lineman's mindset when you go into a game like this, where you're thinking, all right, this quarterback's really not the best we've ever seen? I mean, but these guys are on the Final Four of the NFL season.
Absolutely, well, as a defensive lineman, you're watching all week and you're looking, and you got your own probably personal. Unless you've played Keenum or even Foles or somebody like that before early in the season, you probably got your own opinion of them because you haven't been really watching them. But then you start to watch some tape and you're like, man, I can really get after him. If I really get a clean lick on him, or if I'm able to get in the backfield and really affect him, I can really, affect the outcome of the game through the quarterback. But then you probably get in the game and a guy like Nick Foles he starts to get warm a little bit, or just like Case Keenum the other day, just continue to hit those shots. Or even Blake Bortles. You think about somebody like Blake Bortles was just playing with a tremendous amount of confidence the other day that you can't get to him, or even if you get to him and you start making those shots, he doesn't start acting like you saw him on the previous tapes.
Mm-hmm.
It starts to frustrate you a little bit, and that's when you see these guys take those late hits or do different things to try to really affect the quarterback in those old Deacon Jones type of head slap ways or whatever, things you can't do anymore. But I think if you had to ask me who would I want to go against, I'd probably say Blake Bortles, man. I'd probably say Blake Bortles, just because I saw Blake in Florida when we had the privilege to go down there and beat them up, and Mike Davis had a nice little day running some screens and different things like that, and I think we got a turnover to win the game. But all in all, Blake Bortles looks to me the same guy today as he did then, so I'll take that Blake Bortles. I'll try to go against Blake Bortles.
So who am I going to be eating wings watching on Super Bowl Sunday? Who are the two teams I'm going to be watching?
Oh man, the anarchist NFL Langston says the Jacksonville Jaguars and I guess Foles and the Eagles, a backup quarterback Foles and the Eagles, but it'll probably be the most boringest NFL Super Bowl you've probably ever seen. It'll be the Minnesota Vikings and the Tom Brady led New England Patriots, and I'm sure Tom Brady they won't even make it close. That game will probably be like it'll be a 17-point win or something like that. They'll kill them.
Yeah, a lot of 5-yard out routes and runs up the middle and things like that.
They're just going to really. I mean, once New England probably gets this lead or something like that in my hypothetical world, they'll probably just show us a lot of shots of that brand new stadium and all these cool little things, and not worry about the product on the football field. They'll just turn it into like like one of those sales pitches to get like a timeshare or something in Minnesota from at the new stadium or something.
And you obviously played in the league for a little bit. I think 6 seasons, somewhere in that range.
Man, I fooled him for about 6-7 years, man.
Who was one player that you were watching on film or you tackled in a game and said, nope, never going to do that one again. That one hurt too much. Was there ever a guy that you went up against and said, if I never have to play him again, I'm going to be a better person for it?
Jerome Bettis was as big as that. I mean, it was like tackling bigger me. I don't know, with more athleticism and higher knees. Him, I never really got to hit because I played with Corey Dillon for a little bit. And Corey Dillon is a massive man. I could only really bang him a little bit in practice. I never really got to feel luckily me, I never got to feel the full brunt of that Corey Dillon that was just kind of lights out before he left Cincinnati and went on to New England. Trying to think, man. I probably, the one that comes to mind right away is Bettis. Of course, AP in his prime when we played him in Detroit twice a year we get that. Those are the ones that I can consciously remember. So the rest of them, they just chalk up to concussion. Yeah,
concussions are too much pizza in 5 points, right?
That's right, carbs. Carbs will do it every time.
And you obviously bounced around a little bit from team to team. Is that hard on a player's psyche when you're in Cincinnati one year and Arizona the next, and then you go to the Lions and things like that? Is it hard for a player? And what was kind of your welcome to the NFL moment when you said, holy crap, I'm here?
My welcome to the NFL moment. I'm trying to think. I mean, just getting yelled at was probably like, going from, being the star and, all the treatment and all of that stuff. And then when you go to your first rookie mini camp, and then the guy who was actually coaching me was a Lou Holtz. He used to coach under Lou Holtz, Jay Hayes. He's actually down in Tampa now as their defensive line coach. He was all, he tried to make. I'm thinking the NFL is going to be like, man, you're a pro. They let you, wear your socks. It was the complete. It was like I went back in time to my freshman year with Lou Holtz in South Carolina. I was like, man, what's going on? So he's getting on me about all that crazy stuff. Yeah. So that was probably an eye opener for me with that. The thing about bouncing around the teams. I think for me, because I was a 6th-round guy and hadn't maybe having some expectations of maybe being a little bit better than I thought I was, and maybe making some more money earlier on than I thought I was. I think that kept me hungry, and it also kept me, I didn't realize at the time I was playing for the bottom half of the NFL. I guess when they make up the 32 teams, somebody has to be, 29, 30, 31, 32. I played for the last one, so I guess I didn't know it at the time, but losing at South Carolina my first year kind of showed me how to not fall into that abyss of some of that, because, it's one thing to lose in college, man, because, there's a lot of pride, and obviously there's a lot of pride in the NFL, but, like, playing on these just like mediocre teams in Cincinnati, or of course playing in Detroit, losing a bunch of games in a row, it can get super lonely, because guys can get segmented really quick and it's because everybody's getting their check. So after a certain point, guys will start looking for job security. Coaches start looking for job security, and the locker room, the change and the culture of it. And you can see how a team like the Cleveland Browns can go years for years because of that, or somebody can be mediocre I'll go ahead and say it, the Cincinnati Bengals. They're going to only hit a certain ceiling because a lot of that is just culture and leadership and things that go on. So, learning to lose, I guess, at South Carolina and overcoming that and then going on to win bowl games, that kind of kept me and showed me how to be a professional. And, I hate to say it, but it sounds corny, but, Lou in South Carolina really prepared me to go on through that and to be on teams and to be a starter on those teams. Because there was, I just seen, just crazy stories of guys who just, from things of, guys don't even want to play. They just want to collect that check and don't want to give effort. So it just felt to me like you were taken away from the game and doing things like that. But just like I said, I empathize with guys like who are on the Cleveland Browns and teams like that. But the biggest thing is not talent when you're trying to overhaul losing teams. The biggest thing is culture.
Right, and you were on that 0-16 team with the Lions, were you not? Were you were you rooting for the Browns to win that final weekend of the year?
Absolutely not, man. My only claim to fame is that I played for the worst teams in the NFL, and I was like the only guy in the history of the NFL to play for for the Cleveland Browns. I'm not the Cleveland Browns, the Detroit Lions. But then I was the only guy to lose every game in college, so I knew it was a record out there somewhere. I didn't even have to check. But now the Cleveland Browns have been added to it now, so I guess I have to put an asterisk or we used to try to equate it to like the Miami Dolphins and their perfect season run, and they'd crack champagne. Well, all the guys from Detroit, we'd open like a case of Mickey's malt liquor every time we went. Somebody at least win one game and not ruin our record. So we don't get that privilege anymore, man. But it was again, man. Everybody always asks me what was my what's the best team I love playing for? And I always say the Detroit Lions. I'm like, really? You lost every game? But that team for a while towards the last few weeks before Black Monday when everybody got canned, it was a really close team. That's probably the biggest thing. That's how you can really gauge how teams really win in the NFL. The guys who are genuinely close, and they couple that with some talent and don't beat themselves. And that's why you always see, I think, teams that understand how to play for each other. Maybe not so, with the New England Patriots, they more so of a military mindset. Don't let their brother down. Everybody just does their job, but they really buy into that really well. And the guys that can really be accountable are the teams that win in the NFL.
And I guess now moving on, you've obviously had a lot of success post playing. You started Eat to Win. Just kind of take me through what went behind that, and what does it kind of stand for, and kind of that platform.
Yeah, Eat to Win is pretty much EAT stands for effort, attitude, technique. Win is what's important now. And these are, again, all football things that we were taught by Coach Holtz. And we just applied it and used that moniker for our football camp because I myself, I lost my father to congestive heart failure. My mother passed away a couple of years after when I was in the NFL. My partner, Preston Thorne, his father passed away before he even came to South Carolina. A couple other buddies of ours and teammates who helped us come up with this idea, their parents had health issues with diabetes and obesity. If you know all about the health and the health report card in South Carolina now, anything along the I-95 corridor, we're tops in the country. I think Mississippi still can hold out for us a little bit. Thanks for Mississippi for that, but we're still in the top ranks for obesity, diabetes, AIDS, all these different things, a lot of preventable diseases. And so we just try to use our platform, football, and couple that with the things that we're passionate about. Healthy eating and things that we learn. We try to use some of the things that football afforded us the opportunity to learn and bring it back to a lot of kids. So we would use football as a draw to come up with a football camp. Everybody has a football camp every year, but what we want to do is have that camp and bring in different guys to talk and coach the kids up and interact with the kids. But while we had them there, we would just infuse them with tons of healthy eating stuff, preventative health care things, any physicals, any things they needed done, dental exams, and at the same time we'd be offering these things to the parents, because we found when we put on these camps, the parents would really just hang around and watch their kids for 2 or 3 hours, catching football, and with parents being so busy doing the best that they can day to day, that was an opportunity for them to get screenings, to get a lot of preventable things and health, eating nutritional tutorials, different things, just using it really as a touchstone for everybody, or a place for everybody to get information, especially when it comes to not only football but also with healthy eating and a lot of preventable healthcare stuff, resources, a lot of free things, because there's so many people doing a lot of great things, especially in the health sector across South Carolina, but a lot of it was spread out, and we wanted to just try to use, again, because football, the one thing everybody kind of gravitates toward, so we try to utilize all that in our popularity, our platform, and things that affected us to put on a camp, but also to give the kids on the field an experience that they might get at a South Carolina camp, at Clemson camp, at a Georgia camp, without having to pay or having to drive to go to these places, or have the talent, because a lot of times they'll find the talented kids that are kind of marginal, or just being around any physical activity. We just wanted to give those kids that experience, and so that's been really cool for us to do that. We're doing this for the last 4 or 5 years. We actually took last summer off just with our Just a Chicken book. We were doing a lot of summer reading programs and summer school programs, so that kind of took us off the football field, but we still helped out with a lot of different guys' camp, like the Ellington Elite Camp, which is held down there in Berkeley. We help those guys out every year. Landon Cohen is a gentleman who I play with in Detroit. He's from Spartanburg. He puts on a camp every year. Henry Taylor is a former Gamecock. Him and Raymond Priester, they put on a camp out in Barnwell. So we still make the camp tours, even though we don't directly have our camp last year in Columbia, but we hope to try to get it back here shortly.
Awesome. And is there just a Chicken 2 down the pipe, or you still gotta?
Yeah, absolutely, man, absolutely. We got a couple books in the pipeline, but the next book we have coming out is going to touch on a few things that are near and dear to the Gamecock Nation, and that's kind of like the chicken curse and all those different things. So we're on the cusp of having it done. We have some sketches and different things that our artist Kevin Roche, who's a Carolina graduate, works for ESPN, lives right there in Columbia. We're getting him to finish up those last pieces for him, so hopefully we'll have it, fingers crossed, before the spring game, but I might be a little bit too ambitious, but we should have it hopefully at worst before the season starts, if we don't have it before the spring game.
Right, and if someone wants to buy a copy of Just a Chicken, where would they go for it?
Yeah, they can go to justachickenthebook.com, that's our website, or they can get it on that magical place called Amazon.com, or it's across it's all over the bookstores in Columbia. It's at Barnes & Nobles. It's on barnesandnobles.com, Adams Bookstore, Todd and Moore, anywhere up and down on Main Street, Uptown on Books, Garden and Black Traditions. So we try to pretty much be obnoxious with our book and put it everywhere.
Yeah, you seem like you're doing a good job of it. It seems like it's taken off really well. I see it all on Twitter all the time, and the feedback seems great from what I've seen online and things like that. So I think that's it, Langston. We appreciate you joining us.
Man, we appreciate you, man. Thanks for letting us share and talk about us, man. Talk about me.
Absolutely. Thanks, Langston. All right. Well, that was Langston. Phenomenal interview. The more I hear about Lou Holtz and his...
The more fascinated I become.
Yeah, and...
Oh, that man is amazing.
if you haven't listened to it, feel free to go back and listen to the Eric Kimry podcast we did as the initial one, and where he told his Lou Holt stories. But the white shoes on the practice field was one of my favorite tidbits from that one. And him talking about playing when watching the Browns go 0-16, which is not great for me as a Cleveland Browns fan.
I don't understand how you live listen, this is a circle of mediocrity because Langston, I should term that better, but Langston obviously played for the Lions and played for the Bengals. And we won't talk about what my feelings of the Bengals, and you're a Browns fan, and I'm a Jets fan, so we all share just in sincere and utter depravity when it comes to pro sports. Yeah,
and I feel bad for Langston because he collected a paycheck from those people, and I'm sure it was hard on him playing those kind of seasons where you're not picking up those wins.
Yeah.
But as a Browns fan, I was rooting for 0-16 because if you're going to be bad, be historically bad.
See, that's the thing. I was rooting for the Jets to go 0-16 as well because they ship off all their players, and you're saying, okay, if you're going to be bad, be good at it.
Yeah.
And the Jets win, and the Jets are picking 6th.
At least I get a T-shirt out of it. If they're going to go 0-16, I can buy a Browns
T-shirt.
T-shirt. Yeah, I get a parade. I get all that fun stuff.
I got being a Jets fan for another year of a 6th draft pick that's going to turn into a defensive lineman.
Yeah. So, no offense to Langston in the defensive line, obviously.
And no offense to Langston in the defensive line, but you need a quarterback, right? So, unless you're the Minnesota Vikings, the Philadelphia Eagles, or the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yes.
Yeah, but Langston was awesome, and I still speak to Kimry. I do PA for Hammond, and I still speak to him, and I still try to get Lou Holt stories out of him. I'm fascinated by the man that is Lou Holt.
Yeah, it's phenomenal, and Langston was great. It was a good sport, and did a lot of joking around with us as well. Yeah. So moving forward, a huge couple weeks for South Carolina athletics as a whole. With the men's team, we touched a lot on that. The men's team got baseball starting up soon, which is my domain for the most part. I do a lot of basketball.
That was said with some force.
Yeah,
hey, your domain.
I get one thing. I get one thing. Wes and Chris are great at recruiting and all that, and I get my sliver of baseball. So
take that, Will Bob.
Yeah, I get my baseball.
There you go.
But it's great. I've resigned myself to, if I ever die, that just bury me at Founders Park, because that's probably where I spend the majority of my time. I was talking to my girlfriend, and we were discussing when we'd be able to see each other this spring.
Good luck.
And I flipped open the calendar, and it's like Tuesday game, Wednesday game, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a lot of fun. The team, the guys that are on the team are great to cover and are always great about giving you good quotes and, being able to talk, and great guys. And Coach Kingston's obviously a fun one to cover in, what's it been now? Got hired in end of June.
Got hired at end of June, so we're not even in a year
not
in yet.
Not in a year,
so
but what?
Several months. It'd be 6 months.
6 months, 7 months, 8 months, somewhere in that range. But it was, he's a fun one to cover, and that entire staff's a class act. So practices officially will start. Small stuff's going on right now, but practices are going to start at the end of January, so be on the lookout for that. And then all the fun stuff that goes along with basketball and baseball and
together.
Yeah.
Derek Scott's going to be pulling double duty on Gamecock IMG, and it's just going to be fun. No, the new era for baseball. I'm interested to see the fan support's always going to be there. I'm interested to see the attitude come opening day. What are fans feeling? Because I believe that over the last year and a half, fans started to get a little irritated more so than anything during baseball season. I've met Chad Holbrook. I've spoken to Chad Holbrook. Chad Holbrook's a fantastic person and a fantastic coach.
Yeah,
I just believe it didn't work out the way he wanted it to late in the run. Mm-hmm. I want to see how fans react to Coach Kingston, because it's not the name they wanted.
No, and
right. I mean, he knows that.
Yeah, and it's he's been very open about embracing expectations, and this is a guy that he coached at Miami. Like he was a volunteer assistant at Miami. He knows, and when you look at him, I've heard stories from former players and guys that he's coached with, and he's been great. He's won everywhere, and he demands a lot out of his players, and they love him from what I've heard and all this stuff. So he's a great. Seems like he'll be a good coach. I'm excited to see what they do about pitching, obviously. Just losing 2 weekends.
That's an important aspect of the game of baseball.
And it'll be interesting to see what this team looks like. because I don't think what they look like opening weekend is necessarily what they're going to look like mid-April.
Sure.
So it'll be a lot of fun to see how they develop and how they play, I guess, to their strengths and what they can do.
And when you take over a big-time program like South Carolina, I would argue that South Carolina is the most tradition-rich program, not named baseball, not named Southern Cal, Texas, or Rice. Maybe LSU.
LSU'd be up
and
there.
LSU's probably. I would put South Carolina fifth all time.
I'd put them in probably in terms of tradition, easily in my top 5. But in terms of jobs in the country, it's a top 10 job, top 15 job in the country.
Yeah. And so, because there haven't been many people who have been the head coach of South Carolina baseball.
Yeah, when you think back,
you got Raines, Richardson, Tanner, Holbrook.
Yeah, and
now Kingston.
And that's dating back to the 70s.
Yeah,
with Bobby Richardson.
It's not a deep list.
No.
So I just want to see how fans respond. Baseball is a great game. Baseball is a game that I think most people love, and I think Carolina baseball is one that people take pride in. It's up until last April, it was the only major championship that South Carolina had to claim. So, hopefully they get the pitching figured out. I want to see how Adam Hill does on Fridays.
Yeah.
Because I want to see him throw 115 pitches and go 9 innings.
He's going to be really good.
He's a solid pitcher.
So. You'll see his name called early in the draft this year.
Good. And you see that a lot with the pitching staffs at Carolina.
Yes. So that's our show. If you have any questions or anything like that, join Gamecock Central.
Why don't you do that? Why are you not doing that yet?
This is free, but join Gamecock Central. We got some great info on there. Not from me most of the time.
It's mostly from Wes and Chris, but whatever.
And baseball's coming up. That's my domain.
But subscribe now so you understand how things work. I don't know why you're not. I don't know why you're not on Gamecock Central at this point.
Follow us on Twitter. I'm at Collyn COLLYN Taylor TAYLOR. And Justin, you want to throw out your?
I am at Justin B Hall JUSTINBHEHA. Excuse me. Whoa, I can't even spell
Justin B Hall.
Justin B Hall HALL. Exciting postgraduate career news.
Yes.
On the horizon. Staying local.
So. Dealing
with sports. That's as far as I'll go, and I'll drop that soon. I'll actually be at some games with you, but I'll be in that vicinity. It'll be fun.
So, but thank you guys, and we'll talk to you soon.